You are tuning into Continental Prime and News Central Television. Earlier during this bulletin, we did bring you a story, breaking news from the Republic of South Africa that the two-year conflict between the Ethiopian government and rebel authorities in Tigray has reached an agreement for cessation of hostilities. Now, joining us live from Sundsvall in Sweden to analyze this and make more sense of this situation is Teklai Gebremicheal, as the editor of Tigray.com. A warm welcome to you, Teklai. Thanks for joining us on Continental Prime.
Thank you. It's my pleasure. Do you hear me now?
Yes, we have you loud and clear. Now, Teklai, what's your take on the truce that was declared today in South Africa, and what are the details, what are the specifics of this truce?
So it's a 13 articles document, the agreement document, but I think the main, the beef of the content is what they call a permanent cessation of hostilities between the two parties, between the Tigray government, which they call the TPLF in the document, the Tigray People's Liberation Front, and the Ethiopian government. So the agreement is between the two. So right from the start, there is significant problem in the agreement because the main actor in the war for the past 2 years has been Eritrea, but the word Eritrea hasn't been mentioned even once in the document. But that notwithstanding, the agreement is between the TPLF and the Ethiopian government, and they say that they have agreed to permanently cease hostilities. And then they go on to talk about how constitutional order should be restored in Tigray, how there should be respect for the constitution. So that would suggest that the Ethiopian government or the Ethiopian regime has agreed to restore Western Tigray to Tigray. Western Tigray has been illegally occupied for the past 2 years, and also to restore Southern Tigray to Tigray as well, because Southern Tigray has been occupied for the most part of 2 years to Tigray. And once that has been achieved and secured, then they go on to talk about how there should be disarmament of the Tigray Defense Forces. Now, that has caused significant outrage among the Tigrayan community, how it is that the Tigray Defense Forces should be demanded to disarm when Eritrea is, even as we speak now, conducting war in Tigray. But the main point of the agreement is a permanent cessation of hostilities between the two parties.
Now, Teklai, I'm happy you mentioned the Eritrean side to this, and Isaias Afwerki and the Ethiopian National Defense Forces, which have been, I believe, on the invitation of Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed, been conducting and waging a war in Tigray. Was Eritrea part of these negotiations in South Africa, and did this agreement in any part mention the presence of Eritrean troops in Tigray?
So the document, the agreement document, which had just been released, doesn't mention Eritrea even once. But whether or not Eritrea was invited to the talks, I don't think it was invited this time around. But the idea of inviting Eritrea to the negotiations was mentioned by Olusegun Obasanjo, I think in August, but it was swiftly dismissed by the Tigray side. They said that Ethiopia should tell Eritrea to leave Tigray, and that the talk should be between Tigray and Ethiopia. But because, for the most part, Eritrea has been in charge of leading the war, Ethiopia couldn't muster the courage and also the ability to say Eritrea or to demand Eritrea to leave Tigray. So on the part of the Ethiopian government, the strategy was to quietly pretend that Eritrea wasn't involved in the war. So it hasn't been involved in the negotiations. And very, very bizarrely, it hasn't been mentioned in the document. So it's very, very difficult for me to see how the items that they have agreed upon in the agreement document could actually be implemented if Eritrea doesn't, for instance, agree to them. Because according to the agreement now, all foreign forces should leave from Tigray. So they use the term foreign forces rather than Eritrea, which I think is an allusion to Eritrea.
Okay, now, Teklai, to the million-dollar question. This is not the first time a truce has been declared in the country, but this time around they mentioned in the document the permanent cessation to hostilities. What's the guarantee that this truce will hold this time around and bring about lasting peace to Ethiopia?
So there's one key difference to the previous talks, Gebenga, which is that this time around, there would be a mechanism for verification of withdrawal and of implementing the items that they agreed upon. They say that there would be an AU team, the panel of experts from the African Union, that will oversee and monitor that the parties respect to the items that they agreed upon. And there is a mechanism for holding the parties to account if and when they breach to any of the items of agreement. So on paper, it does look like that is different this time around because there is a mechanism for verification. But of course, the devil is in the details, as they say, and I don't see how it could actually be implemented without the consent of Eritrea.
Thank you, Teklai Gebremicheal. It's always a pleasure talking to you here on NC Continental Prime. Thanks for your time and your insights. And we do hope that this agreement brings about lasting peace to the long-suffering people in Tigray. Thank you.
Thank you.